Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ice Cold Takes podcast. I am your host, Joey DeMeglio, and the Rangers have started the Patrick Kane era 0-2 and head on the road for 3 games this week against the Canadiens, Sabres, and Penguins. But more importantly, I have a special guest with me for this week's episode. Joining me today is Rangers beat reporter Colin Stephenson from Newsday. Thanks so much for joining me, Colin. How are you?
I'm good. I'm in Montreal, one of my favorite cities. It's and the weather's actually not bad. It's nice. It's above freezing, so that's good. Anytime you're in Montreal, it's above freezing. It's a good time. So it's good. We had a couple days off here, a couple short break. It's weird. The schedule is sort of these 3 games in 4 nights followed by these mini breaks. So it's like a hectic period and then a mini break. And so we just come out of a little mini break and now we're going into 3 and 4 nights. So
Yeah, the Rangers have. It's been no shortage of that sort of stretch of games. I think what was it like? Was it 10 games in 18 days that they had to play? Something along those lines.
I guess I don't know, but it really depends on where you are in it because you remember the last time they were playing, they were in this whole. You mentioned Patrick Kane. I mean, they were in that whole mess with the whole. He's coming, and we got to do all these gymnastics, and we got to have guys on the bench that can't take a shift and all this kind of stuff. And then, finally they had, and then they get a little bit of a break. They had a couple of days of practice the last 2 days, and we'll see what comes out of a couple of days of practice tomorrow.
Yeah, those guys must have been exhausted, especially the defenders, like playing shorthanded. And I know some games they had 4 defensemen. Like the one game against the Kings a couple weeks ago, 4 defensemen. They played 5 defensemen for a few games. Like they must have been gassed, right, in the locker rooms afterwards.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. I think that first of all, they all understood what was up, right? It's not like it took them by surprise. They knew what was happening. They knew why it was happening, and they understood that they had a job to do, and they did it for the most part. There was the only time I felt like they looked really tired was in the second period against Philadelphia, which interestingly enough was. You're playing the Flyers, and the Flyers are bad, and you're losing to the Flyers, which, shouldn't happen under any circumstances. And that second period, they were just awful. And then in the third period, they kind of picked up, I'm sure somebody said some harsh words in the locker room in intermission, and they picked it up, and they ended up winning the game, which is what they should do. And then the next day, they had Patrick Kane. But, playing with 5 D-men for – as long as they have, as you mentioned, they had 6 in Washington. Actually, in Washington, they had 7, right? Because they had started doing the whole,
that's when they scratched Leighton
guys out and sit out Kravtsov and Leighton, and they were playing 11-7 that game, and then Lindgren gets hurt, so they finished up 11-6. They had a game the next day in the Garden against the Kings, as you mentioned. So Lindgren was injured, and so they were dressing 6. But again, for the cap thing, just to refresh people's memories, they were going to have to do some shenanigans in order to create cap room. And so one of the things that they had to do was they had to assign Braden Schneider to the minor leagues for 2 days, and you can't send a player to the minor leagues if he's hurt. So then they couldn't take a chance that he might get hurt in the game on Sunday. So they dressed him, but they didn't play him. He didn't play a shift. So they had 6 dressed, but they were playing with 5. And then Keandre gets kicked out. So they finished with 4. And then the next on Wednesday, then they make the trade for Patrick Kane on late Tuesday. And Wednesday they were able to actually play Schneider because they were able to recall him and play him. So then they had 5, but it still was 5 that Wednesday against Philly, and it was 5 the next night against Ottawa, and it was 5 on Saturday against Boston. Those are the 3 games that Miller was suspended for. And now, now things are kind of back to a place where, is a much better place because Miller's going to be coming back. His suspension is over. I didn't go to practice today, but from what I understand, Ryan Lindgren practiced in a non-contact jersey. So if he doesn't play against Montreal on Thursday, um, he might play Saturday in Buffalo. So, he's almost back. But they should at least have 6 defensemen dressed one way or the other against Montreal. And in fact, they may have, well, no, they won't have, no, they wouldn't have 7. They have 12 forwards. So they would still have six D-men dressed against Montreal. So whether the 6th guy in this case would be Lindgren or Ben Harper, at least they'll have 6. They'll have 3 pairs.
Right. Yes. Harper would be the one that probably gets slotted out. Yeah. So a lot of moving parts over the past couple of weeks. I saw the text message that I heard about the text message from Ryan Carpenter that you better be worth it. I thought that was hilarious.
Yes. Yeah.
Quite the introduction to the Rangers if you're Patrick Kane.
You're getting a text from some guy you don't know, right? It was just like, I got to do this, man. You better be worth it. I like him. I like this Patrick Kane guy. I mean, he seems to be fairly down to earth. My first impressions, obviously, I've only been around him a couple days. But he seems to be pretty down to earth, and he gets it. He understands what the team did in order to bring him here. Obviously, he was in a position where he wanted to play for the Rangers, and he really didn't want to go anywhere else. And when that happened, then everybody was committed to moving him from Chicago to the Rangers. They had to do some crazy stuff, and I think he appreciates it. And I think he admitted to, like, his first couple games, maybe he was deferring a little bit too much and, trying not to step on people's toes. And, maybe he was overpassing and that all of that is natural. But he's had a couple practices with the team now. And we should see the real Patrick Kane very soon.
Yeah. And I think that it's a lot of the human aspect of the player coming over in the trade. We were talking, a lot of people were saying, like, around couple days or a week before the trade deadline, the Rangers weren't looking like how they had played for the majority of the season, at least from the December to up until a couple weeks ago. That stretch of games, they weren't looking the same, possibly because of the stress of the trade deadline. Now you add Patrick Kane, and he hasn't scored a goal or had a point yet in the first 2 games as the Rangers. And, it kind of seems like the sky is falling, at least on Twitter or on social media. But I mean, like, the human aspect of it too. Like, I gotta combine this with one of my questions. Like, you're essentially the resident good luck charm for the Rangers. Every time.
Well, that's. I think my good luck is running out now because I've been talking to Phil Hedl every day and he's not scoring. So, like, it's not working anymore.
Okay.
I'll try him again tomorrow morning at the morning skate if he's and see if that helps. But no, I have some fun with that. I mean, that story goes back a few years ago. There was one day I walked into the locker room and after practice, this is pre-COVID, when we had locker room access before it got shut down. We have it again, but in those days you walked in and you have a vague idea of if this guy's there, I'm going to talk to him, but you never know him. And sometimes a guy's got something to rush off to, and maybe he's not there or he doesn't have time to talk or whatever. So you always go in with kind of like a plan. I want to write this guy today. And I went into the locker room that one day, and I don't think I had a real plan. And Pavel Buchnevich was there, just sitting there by himself. And I said, well, let me go say hello to Pavel. And I just kind of went up to him and I said, hey, Pav, how's it going? And he said, terrible. And he hadn't scored a goal in, I don't know, 8 games, 14 games, whatever it was. He hadn't scored a goal in a long time. So, and I wasn't even aware of that. I mean, I wasn't going up to him saying, hey, you haven't scored a goal in 10 games, whatever it was. I just was saying hi. And he went off about how, he was down and blah, blah, blah. So I wrote a story about him not scoring a goal for X number of games. And lo and behold, the next game he scored a goal. So I was like, yeah, this is my thing. I made it happen for him. And then the next day I spoke to Phil Hedl, and he scored a goal. So then that became like my thing. It became my running joke where, I talk to these guys and they score. And then so when they made the trade for Tarasenko and Nico Mikola, went up to we spoke to them. It was a morning skate, and spoke to McCullough, and I said, I got this thing going on. You talk to me, and you have a good chance of scoring a goal. I don't know if you remember that night. The Rangers scored a goal, and it was credited to him, which I didn't see. I thought for sure that Panarin had deflected it in.
I did too. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
But initially it was credited to McCullough, and then whatever. Eventually it got fixed, and he got given to. But I saw McCullough next day. I'm like, hey man, I almost made it happen for you. And he was laughing. So we have some fun with that. But yeah, no, I think my luck's run out for now.
Yeah, no, hockey players are very superstitious, especially come playoff time. I know as a fan, I definitely am superstitious. Like if the Rangers are doing well and I'm sitting in one particular spot, I am not moving a muscle for the rest of that night until something bad happens. But like, do you know of like any other superstitions in the locker room, or are you superstitious yourself?
No, I'm not superstitious at all. I mean, I have fun with that thing, but no, I'm not, and I don't see too many guys. They're not open with their superstitions, and I suppose I could ask some guys if they have them, but I think probably most of them don't want to talk about it. So unless you get a guy to talk about some other guy's superstitions, I mean, it'd be, it's just not worth the effort. I haven't found to go and dig that up and see who's super superstitious. But it is good back to be, getting back into the locker room after the last couple of years not being in there. And you get to see these guys and see who's cool and who's approachable and all that kind of stuff. And they have a pretty friendly team, and it's been fun. It's been fun watching them grow and watching them get good. As you and I discussed before we started this, I started covering this team in February of 2018, about 2 weeks or 3 weeks after the letter. In fact, my first day on the team was the day after that trade deadline. So they had traded away at the deadline. They had traded away Ryan McDonough and JT Miller and all that. So, I mean, it was really a stripped down version of the team that I got. So the way I look at it is, I kind of got to see the rebuild from the bottom up. I got to see them, stripped down all the way to the bottom, and then they hired David Quinn and all that. And so I kind of got to see them build it up from the bottom. So that's kind of cool.
So you actually entered that locker room, at almost pretty much like the lowest points of Zibanejad and Kreider's career. Like you're going in there, and I read Vince's story about it and how the feeling after all those trades that transpired, and it's like you're going in, starting a new job, all happy, and then like they're on the other side of that rebuild. So that's a kind of an interesting dynamic, and it's crazy. I'm sure in your eyes, like you're there, every day or, however often you're there to talk to the players. And, the feeling is completely changed now. This is the playoff team now, and they're no longer at the bottom of the standings. Like the roster is well established now. The players, we know who's on the team. Whereas back then it was like, what just happened?
Yeah. So, the interesting thing when, you mentioned Kreider and Zibanejad, I mean, really it was Lundqvist. It was the guy.
Yeah, that too. I forgot about that. Yes.
And it came out that they had gone to him out of respect and, and said, and told him, look, this is what we're doing. And if you want us to trade you, we can trade, we can trade you. We can try and trade you if you don't want to go through this with us. And he said, no, he would stay, and he stuck around. And, but I was there too. Like, and it wasn't that might've been the worst point. I mean, you may look at it because so many guys left, but it wasn't done, right? Because the next year they still had to trade Zuccarello, which made Lundqvist cry. I mean, let's just call it what it is. I mean, I don't want to take choked up or any kind of euphemism, but he was crying. And then they also traded Kevin Hayes, who was a good guy and who was having a great year. And there was some debate. I remember Zuccarello we knew was gone. There was no way they were going to keep him. But Hayes, with his age at the time and what he was doing, and the knowledge that, okay, you're going to need a second line center. There was some debate as to whether or not they should keep Kevin Hayes, and ultimately they didn't. They traded him to Winnipeg, and the rest. They got ultimately got Trouba out of that deal. So, not right away, but, they traded him. They traded Hayes and they got Brendan Lemieux and a first round pick, which they later sent back to Winnipeg
Right.
with Neil Pionk to get, Trouba. So
Mm-hmm.
it ended up being, part one of that deal, and then part two was where Trouba came. So anyway, so they made that choice. But yeah, no, so the trade deadline of 2018 was rough, but it wasn't the end of it. They still had
Oh
a
yeah, absolutely.
and it was pretty rough because I remember, I like Kevin Hayes. He's a good guy. He was funny. He was approachable, and we all knew what the situation was. Whereas Zuccarello, I don't, we knew with him too, but he just didn't take it as well. Like he was a little bit more prickly and stuff. But Hayes had this sort of gallows humor where you could go up to him and joke about it, and it was what it was. So I won't forget those days.
What about the year following? That was the year Kreider. There was a lot of talk of him,
Yeah.
maybe staying, maybe going.
Yeah.
And then of course there was the accident that happened and that was quickly followed by the announcement that, COVID was shutting down the seasons. Like
Yeah.
that must have been a crazy time for you.
That was, what? That was a crazy time. It was an exciting season because we didn't know what to expect. We knew Kreider and Jesper Fast were the two guys who were, in the crosshairs at that point. And we had a sense that, Kreider was the number one trade target. It was going to be the number one rental, but we had a sense that they might keep him, if he was willing to kind of play ball with them and take whatever salary. And so that's what happened. And actually, I think he was one of the first guys. I can't say this. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but he got really, really sick right around he got signed. He signed a deal just before the trade deadline, or around the same time as the trade deadline, and he was really, really, really sick. And this was in February, remember? So this was when COVID was really starting to become a thing. So I don't know. They never said that he had COVID, but he got really, really sick, as I recall, and couldn't play in a game. And then he was playing in a game, and he was just not himself.
And then
But that was the year
break his
too.
foot? Was
What's
that?
that?
Didn't he block it? The puck hit his skate or something, and something happened with his foot shortly
That
after
was
that.
later. Yeah, that was later. And he was when the season shut down, I think he wasn't in the lineup. He was about to come back, but you remember Mika? Mika went nuts. Mika had like 40 goals that year. He had the one game against Washington. We had like 4 or 5 goals or something.
Yeah,
but that was a fun year. And I think if COVID was COVID, right, and COVID stopped the season in March, but I mean, if they'd have played 82 games that year, I think the Rangers probably would have made the playoffs that year. As it was, they made that COVID bubble playoffs, or postseason, as you want to call it, and then the next year, 56 games. I don't know. That was just weird.
Yeah, that one must have been rather difficult for you guys. You and all the other reporters, Molly and Vince. That I can't imagine that. You're not really. It's hard to kind of like a lot of Zoom calls, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So that's how it worked. It was Zoom. Everything was on Zoom. Even when you went to the building, you were allowed to go to the home games, and I think we weren't allowed to travel, at least in the beginning. Some teams did send guys on the road, but it was your benefit of doing that. You weren't going to get in to watch them practice. You weren't going to get in to watch the morning skate. You weren't going to be able to interview them. Everything was on Zoom. You had to request a guy, get him on Zoom. And you could do that from your own home. So it really almost made no sense to go to the city. You weren't getting anything in the city that you weren't going to get from home. So, and then there was even a debate, like, do I even need to go to the Garden? Because, you go to the Garden, and yes, the one difference is you do get to watch the game from the press box, so you can see some stuff that maybe you might not see, on TV. But is that really worth it? And so it was just a weird thing. And there was no vaccine yet, and we were all nervous, and it was a different time. But I think we're back to, I don't want to say back to normal just yet. I don't know if I could say that, but things seem to be running along pretty smoothly. The only other thing is the salary cap didn't go up by as much as people would expected because of all the money lost and stuff. So, that's kind of a lingering effect now. Is teams are, it's a hard cap, and teams got to figure out, how they can structure their roster and do crazy things like, make three-way deals and, send guys down to the minors on paper for 2 days so you can fit in Patrick Kane at the deadline and all that kind of stuff.
Lots of conversations with the hockey stat miner about that one on Twitter for sure.
That was creative though, right? I mean, that was, it gave us something to write about for a few days.
Yeah. I like that now you guys are back to a point where you can go to the practice, and as a journalist, you need to pump out content too. And I'll speak for myself, but I know a lot of other fans love all the videos, like even the short little clips at practice, because stuff that they don't broadcast the practices, like they don't do any of that during, like, even during the off season, like training camp. I know some people were clamoring to have that as an option. I don't know if that would be a relatively good thing, but more Rangers content, the better, is what we like to see.
No, the interesting thing, the best thing about it, well, yes, that we do get to video stuff. I mean, it's where that balance between observing and then recording, right? Or you see something, and by the time you start recording, it's gone. You see something happening. So as opposed to, like, if I was a videographer or something, you're always looking through the camera and then you just catch everything. But that's interesting. But I think the biggest benefit to the fans is that you don't get the same story from everybody, right? Because in the Zoom days or the press conference days, we all had access to the same people every day. So they would choose, the team would choose, or sometimes we would be able to request, but ultimately we were getting 2 or 3 guys, and we all had the same access to the same guys. And so now what happens is, on a practice day, I'll go talk to one guy, and Vince might talk to somebody else, and Molly will talk to somebody else, and you'll get 3 different stories. And Arthur Staple will talk to somebody else. You'll get 4 different stories. So, so I think that's good. I mean, you talk about more content, that's more content as opposed to, 4 versions of the same story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you guys definitely, like, at practice, you'll pick up on different things. Like, Brooks was talking about the power play. He wrote about that. You might be seeing something with the 5-on-5 lines, or, how, there's you were calling out before the overpassing kind of thing with what Gallant was calling out. And on the note of practice, I mean, we might as well shift into a conversation. It's like what you saw. Today's Wednesday, so yesterday on Tuesday, the 5-on-5 lines stayed the same, right? The Kreider, Zibanejad, Tarasenko, and then Panarin, Trocheck, and Patrick Kane are still together, right? And then the only change is Brodzinski in on the 4th line.
Right. And that was only and Mott was skating, but he was in a non-contact jersey. I didn't go to practice today because I was traveling to Montreal, but from what I understand, Mott practiced today in a regular jersey, in a red jersey, in the 4th line jersey. So, if he came through that practice all right, there's a chance that he could play Thursday in Montreal. So that would be interesting. But yes, no. So what you're getting at is, obviously he kept the lines, the 5-on-5 lines together, but he really did some radical changing of the power play, and he broke up power play 1, and which is weird, like that since I've been here, power play 1's been basically the same. It's been Mika, it's been Kreider. Well, actually, before Panarin got here, it was Mika, Kreider, Buchnevich, and then Tony DeAngelo was the power play point guy at that point. And then Strome was in there, right? So, and then at some point, Panarin came and essentially replaced Buchnevich. And then at some point, Fox sort of replaced Tony DeAngelo, but that's power play one's basically been together the whole time as a group. And then this year, Trocheck came and replaced Strome, but it was still, Kreider and Mika and Panarin and Fox with Trocheck coming in there for Strome. And now, when you get Patrick Kane and you get Tarasenko, it's like, okay, what are we going to do with these two guys, right? Obviously, they both have to play on the power play. And before, when you had Tarasenko, but you hadn't had Kane, it looked like Tarasenko, literally that game against Philadelphia, he had a goal and 2 assists, and it looked like he was really starting to click with Kreider and Mika. And then the next day you bring in Patrick Kane and you put Patrick Kane in that spot, and then you put Tarasenko down to the second power play, which bounces one of the kids, right? That first game, it was Lafreniere that got bounced. These last, the second game, it was Kakko that got bounced. And now, based on what they did at practice on Tuesday, he's broken up power play one. You got Kreider and Mika and Tarasenko, and then he's put Phil Hedl on that group. And as of Tuesday, he had Trouba there. I don't know if that might be Keandre at some point. And then the other group was, Kane and Panarin have to stay together, and then they also get to play with their line mate, their 5-on-5 line mate, which is Trocheck, and then they have Fox. So, and Lafreniere is the fifth guy. So Kakko is out, and as of Tuesday, Keandre was out, but it's either Keandre or Trouba. So we'll see how they line up on Thursday, but breaking up power play one and having 2 sort of more balanced power plays is an interesting look.
That was a conversation that we've had like earlier on in the season. Gallant was saying, power play one is too good. They have too many good players on there. We can't break them up. Now, like you said, Tarasenko and Kane, where are you going to put them?
Added 2 good players. I mean, you can't fit all. There's only, you can only fit 5 guys on power play one, and one of them has to be a defenseman.
Yeah.
So you just had too many good players, and so I think it allows him to have, power play one and power play 1A versus power play one and power play 2.
And I'm aware that Panarin, the idea was to have Panarin on the left circle and Zibanejad also on the left circle, because when they put Panarin and Zibanejad out there with Kane, it was like almost too much awesome. They had Zibanejad in the slot instead. So my question is, like, where does Hedl play on like one of those units, or what part of the ice does he play on? And also the same thing with Lafreniere. Are they in the slot or are they at net front?
Yeah, Lafreniere is net front on that group. Okay. With Trocheck is in the slot, and Panarin and Kane are in the 2 circles. So for the other group, Zibanejad moves back to the left circle. Tarasenko's in the right circle, and Kreider's net front. So that means Hedl's in the slot.
Hedl's in the slot, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember before Panarin came, Mika was hanging out in the left circle, and then Buchnevich was in the right circle, and Strome was in the slot. And then when Panarin came, he replaced Buchnevich, but they put him in the left circle. They moved Strome to the right circle, and they put Mika in the slot, that bumper spot they call it. Mm-hmm. And so they did that for a while, and we, at the time we were like, well, Mika's the left circle guy. I mean, he takes those one-timers, and you move him. But that's what they did initially, and then eventually, at some point, they moved Panarin from the left circle to the right circle, and they moved Strome from the right circle into the slot and moved Mika back to the left circle.
That was the recipe for success.
Yeah,
last year.
That's what they, that's kind of the lineup that they had for the last X number of years.
Yeah, that was the one. So now seeing that all change, it's like really the first time, and a
number of years, right? It's been years since
because I mean you you would say, okay, yeah, Strome was replaced by Trocheck, but really it's just a substitution, like just the one player, you know?
Yeah.
You call
Yeah.
it an upgrade, whatever you want.
The biggest change was when they added Panarin, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because when they added Panarin to the group, the whole thing is they didn't have a lefty in that right wing circle. So you couldn't take one-timers from that side of the ice. You had Mika, who was a right-handed shot, in the left circle. He could take one-timers from there. And then initially you had Buchnevich, and who was a left-handed shot in the right circle. And then at some point they decided, you know what, enough with this. We can't be worried about left shot, right shot stuff. We're going to put our best 5 guys on the ice. And so Strome replaced Buchnevich, and Strome went in the right circle, even though Strome was a right-handed shot. So Strome was not a shooting option from the right circle. He was a passing option. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, Strome and, as I said, Strome went to the slot. Panarin went to the right circle. Mika went back to the left circle. So you still then don't have a shooter in the right circle. Well, now with Kane, both Kane and Tarasenko, who are both left-handed shots, they both give you that left-handed shot in the right circle that can be a shooter. Mm-hmm. And so, but as people have pointed out, if you have Kane's a passer by nature.
I was just going to say, yeah.
And Panarin is a passer by nature. So you have Kane in the right circle as a passer, Panarin in the left circle as a passer. So you have, instead of having shooters in the 2 circles, you have passers in the 2 circles. So Kane and Panarin work beautifully together, and we'll have to see. That's we're experimenting here still, and we'll have to see how that works.
Like I've seen people say, oh, Gallant put all of his shooters on one line, all the passers on the other line. They could all shoot. I know they could all shoot. Is it all just a collective message from Gallant? Like, all of you guys, start shooting the puck. Stop passing it.
Every coach ever wants his guys to shoot the puck. I mean, Gallant's not the first Rangers coach that I've covered that complains that they don't shoot the puck enough. David Quinn used to complain about that all the time. The Rangers, and particularly with Panarin likes to play east-west, and he likes to make clever passes and stuff. Mika will shoot it. Kreider will obviously shoot it. Tarasenko will obviously shoot it. But Kane and Panarin do like to go east-west, and they do like to make passes. And I do think that they, in the first 2 games, we've seen that those 2 guys, and they know each other. Obviously, Kane doesn't know anybody else. But they've had a couple of instances where, one's made a clever pass to the other. So I think that, their chemistry is worth it. But it's just, with 2 playmakers in the circles, then Trocheck's going to have to be the shooter, from the slot. You know what I mean? Like, and Gallant said that Panarin can play anywhere. So, I don't know. Why wouldn't you put Trocheck in this? I don't know. But, if you look at the other unit, Mika will shoot from the left circle. Tarasenko will shoot from the right circle. Kreider obviously will, shoot from the net front. And Hedl likes to shoot. So, you do have, and then, depending on who the point man is, Keandre is more of a passer as a point man, but Trouba's all shooter. So, yes, I can see it. You have Trouba shooting, you have Mika shooting, you have Tarasenko shooting, you have Phil shooting, and, of course, Kreider is at the net front. So, yes, you do have essentially 5 shooters on that unit.
Did any of the players call out the overpassing? I know Kane did, but did anybody?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't spoken to Panarin lately. I think we spoke to him after the first game. We haven't spoken to him since. The way, not a complaint. I'm not complaining. But a lot of times after road games, or after games in general, you don't have access to anybody you want. I mean, you can ask for a guy, but if he's in the shower or if it's too late, it doesn't necessarily work. But you walk into the room and you there's like 3 guys there or maybe 2 guys there. And so we all kind of just get the same guys after a game. Sometimes you ask for a guy and they might bring him in if he's available, but sometimes he's not. So, guys aren't always available after a game, and we haven't seen. We saw Panarin after the first Kane game, that Ottawa game, because he wanted to talk about his buddy Patrick Kane, but we didn't see him after Boston. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if he was going to call out, and I didn't see him yesterday at practice. So, you don't need everybody to call out over passing. I mean, I think Kane admitting it is enough. I mean, we all saw it.
Also, the coach too.
And the coach, the coach is going to call that out.
Yeah. The East-West passing too, and I noticed the defensive coverage has been a bit iffy too over the past couple of games. I know they're shorthanded, but
yeah,
I think I saw one of you guys call it out. I think Gallant called it out, but I don't remember exactly what he said. But I mean, did he say anything about D zone coverage, like defensive? It seems like there's been a lot of turnovers.
Yes. So the turnovers have been an issue, and I think one of the things that Panarin said when Kane first got here was that he and Kane think the same way. They think the game the same way, and the way they think is they really try to be creative, and they really try to take chances, essentially. So they're high risk players, but the reward is big. So you kind of live with that. But yeah, they're going to turn the puck over, and it's going to put their defense and it's going to put their goalie under pressure at times. And the reward is sometimes they're going to make beautiful plays and it's going to get goals for you. So they're both going to put pressure on the defense because they're going to turn the puck over. And I don't think either one of them is going to be all that strong and racing back to back check, right? So it's more of a high risk thing when those two guys are on the ice at the same time. And as we mentioned, they're both looking to make plays, so you need a shooter on the line. So if Trocheck's going to be the shooter and these two guys are going to try and make plays, then it's going to be hard for Trocheck to get back too. So they're going to put the team in compromising positions at times, but the idea is more often than not, they're going to create something positive that'll be worth it. And so, that's going to be an issue. And we will see, as we pointed out, the last 3 games at least, they only had 5 defensemen dressed. So now that they're going to have 6, and they're not going to be rotating 5, they're going to have 3 set pairs. It'll be easier from a matchup standpoint to get, Fox and Lindgren out against whatever line you want them out against, and then Keandre and Trouba out against whatever line you want them out against. We'll see if that makes a difference. And then you need the goalie to make some saves, right? I mean, we've gone this far without mentioning the goalie, but if you're going to play a style that's going to be somewhat high risk and is going to lead to some odd man breaks, you're going to need your goalie to make some saves.
Yeah, I know Shesterkin was having a bit of a rough go of it, at least over the past couple of weeks, but I mean, he's looked a little bit better, and I know there was a lot of conversation about, why doesn't he talk to the media and whatnot. It's, I'm sure you guys, you don't have a problem with it if he doesn't want to talk. I mean, it's just, he knows that he's played not up to his standards, right? And he's addressed it before. Is that do you think it's any more of a concern than what we actually think it is?
Well, so it's a free country, and if he doesn't want to talk, obviously he doesn't have to talk. But in having said that, there's a certain amount of accountability that you'd like to see him show. So, and I think, I don't want to say we were spoiled by Henrik Lundqvist, but in the days prior to Shesterkin, which is Lundqvist the starting goalie always spoke after a game. Always. Win, lose, draw, shootout, whatever. We always got the starting goalie after a game. And Lundqvist was brilliant, right? He was able to break the game down and explain things to you. And a lot of times your notebook would be already full from talking to everybody else, and then you would get Lundqvist, and he would just be better than everybody else. So, the guy was accountable, and if he didn't play well, he would own up to it. And he would also call people out if they didn't play well. We gave up too many rebounds, or we didn't have enough quality looks at their net, or whatever. Because being there after the game and being accountable to say, yeah, I should have had that one, is something that we sort of expect. And so if Igor is not going to be there after a game to say, yeah, that was my bad, or whatever, then, that's something that's kind of letting him off the hook a little bit. But yes, you are correct. I mean, notably the game against New Jersey way back in November, I guess it was, or maybe it was, I think it was like November 30th or something like that, when we asked for him and he came back into the room and he said what he said, which was, I'm ashamed of the way I'm playing. Like, that was taking accountability for the way he was playing. And I think his game picked up after he said that. Mm-hmm. And they shortly thereafter went on the long run. There was other stuff that happened. Trouba, fought the 2 times and threw his helmet, and that's kind of what we do. But I really kind of look at it from, that was the night when Shesterkin came in and told us, he was ashamed of the way he was playing. So I do think that, there's a certain amount of responsibility to be accountable to the teammates and to the fans if you're playing, not so well. And, but from a practical standpoint, he doesn't handle the language as well as Lundqvist did, right? I mean, he speaks English well enough to communicate, but it's kind of, he's not able to break down things the way Lundqvist could. Like, he'll just say simple stuff like, oh, the guy's blocked a lot of shots for me, or whatever. And so, yeah, you can talk to him, but a lot of times you talk to him and don't end up quoting him because the quote's not that interesting. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the balance that we're trying to strike as media in the post game. Like, is it worth waiting for this guy? Because he may not be all that interesting. But on the other hand, if you don't, just let him not talk, then he's not, you're not holding him to account. So that's, most of us are on tight deadline after a game, and, talking to a guy that's not going to help your story oftentimes is not the way you want to go. But again, if he doesn't talk after 4 or 5 straight games, is that good? I don't know that it is.
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. I mean, it was a rough go, but like, have you seen some sort of
yeah, definitely. I have. I think
in his game, I'm saying.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think he's been better. He struggled. Was it the one where he gave up like 4 goals in
Washington, maybe?
So I think Washington was weird. No, I'm going back to the Western Canada trip. That's where he was. That's where he really, kind of didn't look great, and he was giving up a lot of goals. And at that time they were winning games 6-4. Like, he'd give up 4 goals and they'd win 6-4 or something like that. And we were like, well, okay, you're scoring all these goals, but you're still giving up 4 goals, and Igor's still giving up 4 goals. And so that's, I think, where we started to sort of look at it and notice it. Like, since the All-Star break, this guy hasn't been the same. But I do think that since he spoke to us, he's played better. Now, he's played better, but at the same time, they've played 2 men short. They've played 1 defenseman short, and they're still giving up goals. And they're playing high-risk hockey with the guy in Patrick Kane that, hadn't had a practice with him. I mean, like, he showed up, didn't even have a morning skate. He just kind of showed up on the ice with these guys. He knows 1 guy, right? So, he's looked at some video of what they do and things like that. He's talked with the coaches, but he hadn't been on the ice with the guys. And then there was no morning skates because it was the second game of a back-to-back. There was no morning skate against Boston because it was a 1:00 game. So and there was no practice on Friday because it was the day after a back-to-back. So, he played his first 2 games without having practice with the team. And so, again, high-risk player, there's some turnovers, and I can't look at any goal that Igor gave up in the last couple of starts and say, yeah, he should have had that one. But, with goalies, it's always, yeah, I can't fault them for any of the goals. But at the same time, if you give up X number of goals on Y number of shots, you got to do a little bit better. So
Yeah.
I think he's looked better. And then now we need to see the results get better. Does that make sense?
That's the ice cold take of the week. There you go. I like it. Name of the show. We like to do that in the show. But yeah, there's certainly I think a lot of times the Rangers have left them out to dry.
Yeah,
especially in
definitely.
that Washington game, there was a lot of odd man rushes.
The
hadn't seen
Washington
as
game,
many
they were
like
bad.
that.
They were bad in Washington. It was just a horrible, horrible game. It was a weird game too because, like what was happening on the ice, we knew was less important than the whole, okay, they're going to have to trade Kravtsov now and they're going to have to move this guy. And, all of that crazy stuff that was going on to kind of, get Kane in, like that was kind of almost taking precedence over the game. And so, yeah, it was just weird. And the players will say the right things and, oh, no, we're professionals. We got to do this. But, come on, they're humans too. And they were affected by that. There's no question they weren't affected by that. So, I'm not going to give them a pass necessarily, but, yeah, you're going to have a bad game once in a while. I think, and then, even Boston was a great game. The Ottawa game is, where Kane plays and, they're playing five guys. That's kind of where you look at and say, you should beat Ottawa. And you're playing second night of a back-to-back. You got five guys on defense. You should. And he had 11 forwards too, right? They dressed 12 forwards, but then they lost Tyler Mott in the first period, so they finished with 11 forwards. So they finished with 11 and 5. So you're down two guys, and so at some point you can't. There are excuses, and if you allow yourself to make excuses for yourself, it's not going to go well. So there's times when we can acknowledge it, but you don't want to use it as an excuse either. So
good teams find ways to win.
Right. So that's why I think that this stretch that they're going on now, and Montreal certainly a winnable game. Buffalo, I don't want to say it's a winnable game, but it's a winnable game, really. I mean, if you're the Rangers, you should be better than Buffalo, right?
Right.
Pittsburgh, I don't know what they're doing. So, but they're it's 3 games in 4 nights, but they're all winnable games. So you would anticipate that they better win some of these games. You know what I mean? Like they better win some.
Right. Like you can't take any of the teams for granted. Like Montreal, they may be at the bottom of the standings, but I think Kane said it today. I saw a quote that, they have some younger guys that are hungry, want to establish themselves in the league. Buffalo too, and they want to establish themselves as a contender. And then Pittsburgh, you could never count them out, right? If they're healthy, you can't count Pittsburgh out. So you can't take any of these games for granted. But at the same time, it's like the Rangers, they got to come away with it, and they're fortunate to have created enough separation between them and the next wild card team. Right, like there's a sizable gap. I think it's the Islanders, but the Rangers still have games in hand on them.
Yes, I mean, I'm not too worried about their positioning, and whatever struggles they're going through, whatever adversity they're going through at this time, I know they'll be there at the end, so long as they're healthy, right? So that's not really the issue, but you do need to have success and know in your mind that you've had success and that what you're trying to do is effective and all that kind of stuff. You need positive reinforcement for your efforts, and it's like what we were saying with Leighton. You can see why they might lose this game or why they might lose that game, and it's a back-to-back, it's 3 and 4, but at the end of the day, it's 3 games against 3 teams that you should beat. You should beat all of them.
Yep.
Right? I'm not going to say that they should sweep this 3 games in 4 nights, but if you look at each team that they're playing, they're better than every one of these teams. And so, they need to win 2 games, 3, maybe all 3. They need to find a way. They need to find either you're not going to have oh, we played with 11-5, right? Because you're going to have 12-6.
At some point, you're gonna have to let that go as an excuse.
Yeah, no, but you have 6 because Keandre's back, and
Yep.
you'll have Ryan Lindgren back at some point too. And you will either have Tyler Mott or you will have Johnny Brodzinski. So you'll have 12 forwards. So that won't be an issue anymore. Like, we were willing to say, hey, 11-5, hey, they did the best they could. But now you're going to be 12-6. So you don't have that crutch. So they need to win the games. They just need to win the games to have that belief and to have that. And Patrick Kane needs to play well. Because, again, as much as he's accomplished in the league, this is the first time he's been traded. So he's coming into a team with a new, with new guys and stuff. It's we talked to him yesterday, and he still calls guys by their last names. Like, that doesn't happen. Normally when you're on a team, it's Mika this, and it's Crides that, and it's, Goody and Troach and all these guys, you know what I mean? Like, he's still coming in here talking Zibanejad. He's still talking about, oh, Miller got kicked out. Like,
yeah.
It's he's not like, you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of, he's on a new team. Like, it's the first time that he's been traded.
Yeah, he's got to get comfortable.
So he's got to get he's got to get to the point where he can call Keandre Key. He can call Goodrow Goody, or Weiss, or he's got to get to the point where he can use nicknames instead of calling guys by their last names. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
it's just it's a small thing, but it's sort of a, it's just a clue that he's like not quite feeling like he's part of it yet. He's still sort of an outsider on this team.
He even said it too. It wasn't going to be like overnight. I think he was referring to the Panarin chemistry again, but I mean, it applies here too. I think that's a good point you brought up, that he's, referring to people by their last names. It's like, we've grown accustomed to all these players. They've been, majority of this roster is carried over from last year. And for the new additions, like Trocheck has been here for a while. He already knows the group. Like, he's established himself here. And Tarasenko too is like had a few weeks too.
Yeah, exactly. It's this guy's still fresh. I mean, like, he got traded a week ago. So, and he's played 2 games and he's had 2 practices. And, again, we need to see, we know he's a good player. We know he's a Hall of Fame player. So that's not really, that's not in question. It's not like, you think, oh man, maybe they made a mistake. No, I don't think that's it. But the pressure on him is going to grow the longer he goes before he has like a breakout game. You know what I mean? So the sooner you get that breakout game is the sooner you relieve that pressure on yourself, and you can just play.
Mm-hmm. And last question I have for you before we wrap it up, with Gallant and these 5-on-5 line combinations, do you think he's going to be a little bit more patient with these combos, let it ride out a little bit before he makes any more drastic changes, such as the ones he made to the power play? Because I know the ongoing joke this year is like he might change his lines like as often as he changes his underwear or something like that. Well, I think that was Vince's quote from a while ago.
So yes, the answer, the short answer to your question is yes. He's going to run with these lines. Like, he has said to us all along, all season long, like, he had in his mind a vision of what the lines should be, right? And he likes the kid line together. So if you start with that kid line as your third line, then now you were looking for, okay, you want Mika and Kreider to be together, and so therefore Trocheck and Panarin have to be together. And then the question was, who plays on the right side of each of those lines? Well, now you've gone out and you've solved that, right? Because you've gotten these 2 guys. You've gotten Tarasenko, you've gotten Kane. So now Tarasenko is up with Mika and Kreider, and you've got Kane to play with Trocheck and Panarin. And, Trocheck seems to have picked up his game, and he seems to be meshing with Panarin now much better than he did in the first half of the season or even 2/3 of the season. Mm-hmm. It's been much better lately. And Tarasenko, who's been here since February 9th, I think was the day when they made that trade, he does now in the last 2 or 3 games looks really comfortable with Mika and Kreider. So I don't see any reason to change any of that. And now, if you look at, they went out and now when you get those two guys, what that does is it pushes Goudreau down to the fourth line, pushes VC down to the fourth line. VC, as you remember, was a training camp tryout, and the idea was he was coming in to win a spot on the fourth line and maybe be a penalty killer. And then for most of the season, he was playing in the top 9 because somebody needed to, right? And he was able to do that. But now, by getting Tarasenko and getting Kane, VC now has been pushed down to the fourth line, and Goudreau has been pushed down to the fourth line. And that gives you a pretty good fourth line. I mean, if your fourth line is VC, Goudreau, and Tyler Mott, it's a decent fourth line. We know what the kids can do. And then, if Tarasenko, like I said, he looks, the last 2 games looks really good with Kreider and Zibanejad. And if that's a good line, there's no reason to change it. And even even the fact that Kane hadn't scored a point in the first 2 games, I think there were times when he looked good with Panarin. So I think you're going to keep him with Panarin. I don't see any reason to change any of these lines. I think these are the lines going forward. Barring an injury and somebody comes out, then you may see some shuffling. But I think these are the lines. And then we'll see if the power play is going to be what it was on Tuesday. We'll see if at some point he tries to go back to a power play 1, power play 2 thing. But if you go back to a power play 1, power play 2, only one of Tarasenko and Kane can play on power play 1. So that's the problem there. But the lines, I think the 5-on-5 lines are set for now.
All right, and it's gonna be exciting to see how they gel together. The 4 days off, I think everybody needed it for that decor. The Patrick Kane needed it. I heard he was going to look at places to live in New York. I think, was that you?
Yeah, no. Yeah, that was something that Larry Brooks asked him, where he was living, and I guess he was staying in a hotel in the city. But he's gonna be around for a couple of months anyway. The season ends. There's more than a month and change to for the end of the regular season, and then playoffs. So I mean, he might be around for 2 months. So he's not going to stay in a hotel for 2 months. He's going to try and get a place, and so I think he said he got a chance to walk around the city, or I guess go around the city and start looking at potential places he could live for 2 months or more. But that's all part of it too. I mean, living in a hotel is fine for a couple of days, but it gets old after a while. So, I mean, if he can find a place where he can live and be comfortable, and this is home, even temporary, that'll help him too in terms of a mental health thing.
Yeah. Well, Colin, thanks so much for doing this with me. Really appreciate it. This is fun.
Yeah. No, I mean, thanks for bearing with me through all my my travel misadventures, and I'm sorry if I talk too much, but it is what it is.
No, the people love to hear the special guests. They love it. They love it. Yeah, the Ice Cold Takes listeners, they love it. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you guys next week.